the die is cast, and the Dragon Princess has been judged and sentenced to die in less than 24 hours. This story began with the execution order for the Dragon Princess, Rin, whose deeds had been misconstrued. Meanwhile, in the world of normal people, our protagonist, Yuno, was busy yawning his soul out after grinding through another exhausting task as a student council member. Yuno is not just an ordinary member. He proudly served as vice president and also a gym bro deeply obsessed with his hot body. Just then, his assistant, Abara, entered the student council office and caught him flexing his gains like those fitness influencers on Instagram. Offended, Yuno snapped that she should have knocked before intruding on his private muscle appreciation moment. Instead of apologizing, Abara just palmed her forehead, wondering what brain damage had led her to fall so hopelessly in love with the goofball. Unable to control her horniness, Abara immediately hugged Yuno, whining about going on a date over the next school break. However, before Yuno could even dish out a reply, the student council president, Ranko, and secretary, Aya, stepped into the office. Ranko wasted no time scolding Yuno and Abara for their loved-up PD session, insisting that as members of the student council, they should act like role models for other students, not thirsty adult movie actors. Settling into the president's chair, Ranko inquired whether Yuno had prepared the documents for verification, to which Yuno affirmed they were ready, like a true workaholic. Impressed, Ranko gave him a rare compliment for being a diligent VP, but Yuno, trying to be humble, brushed it off as just doing his job. Not buying it, Ranko reminded him that constantly babysitting the council and hogging everyone's work was making them lazy sacks, and at this rate, they might as well start paying him a salary. But Yuno insisted he just liked helping people. Ranko, however, wasn't convinced and warned him that being Mr. Nice Guy was the fastest route to getting played like a fool and getting into serious trouble. While Yuno was busy being lectured, something far more exciting was happening on the outskirts of town. A military chopper, carrying none other than the soon-to-be-executed Dragon Princess, soared through the night sky. Inside, the soldiers were having a serious discussion, mainly about how the heck they were supposed to execute a dragon when their standard guns were about as useless as a toilet lid cover against the Daenerys Targaryen herself. After much debate, one soldier suggested they at least get to the execution site first, and they might be adequately briefed on an efficient way to dispatch this so-called monstrous dragon girl. Unfortunately for them, fate had other plans. Out of nowhere, a powerful electric surge blasted the chopper, sending it spinning, and in the madness, a steel cage broke loose and plummeted toward the earth. Concurrently, two cloaked mercenaries from Loki intelligence, tasked with ambushing and rescuing the Dragon Princess, whose fate, per their intel, was eternal freezing, had launched the attack. While awaiting their next move, the female mercenary was fixated on her phone, texting on WhatsApp, until her partner sharply demanded she focus on the mission. Playfully, she blamed her distraction on the irresistible pull of chatting with her senpai. At the same time that night, our boy trudged home from school, drained from a long day of vice presidential duties. He received a Twitter notification on his phone, and when he checked it, the Bird app was flooded with news about the death penalty for the Dragon Princess. The majority of people agreed that sentencing her to death was unnecessary, while others argued that the judge was probably overcompensating for his midlife trauma. Suddenly, a loud electrical crack jolted Yuno's attention skyward, where he marveled at what resembled a UFO coming straight for him. However, it turned out to be a massive steel crate, which crashed right in front of him, shattering apart to reveal none other than the Dragon Princess herself, Rin, bound and helpless. Yuno stood there, frozen like a malfunctioning NPC, completely shocked. In front of him was a girl straight out of a fantasy fever dream, majestic horns, a tail covered in shell-like scales, and dragon-like wings sprouting from her shoulders. Before Yuno could fully process the walking mythological masterpiece, Rin snapped him out of his dumbfounded state by calling for his attention. She demanded to know if anyone else was lurking around, and before Yuno could even open his mouth, she ordered him to step up and pull something out from behind her back. That word, pull, immediately made Yuno blush like a V-card first-timer at a strip club, because, last he checked, he wasn't inside her to be pulling anything out. After a moment of mental buffering and an awkward pause, Yuno crept closer and realized she was talking about some mechanical device jammed into her spine. With some effort, Yuno yanked it out, only for Rin to scream worse than a virgin losing their V-card for the first time. Once it was out, Rin took a deep breath, thanked him, and, now feeling like herself again, promptly shredded the restraints holding her down like they were made of tissue paper. Now finally free after a long time, the Dragon Princess asked to know the name of her rescuer, to which Yuno nervously responded by stammering out his name. Rin, in return, informed him they'd likely never meet again, so he should just forget about her and not turn into one of those cringy manga protagonists who simp for the first girl they see. But of course, Yuno decided to be exactly that kind of protagonist. As she prepared to take off, Yuno grabbed her hand like a true desperate anime boy, only to instantly regret it when his palm started sizzling like bacon on a skillet. Screaming in pain, he let go while Rin scolded him never to touch her without permission. But in that short moment of contact, her sharp eyes caught sight of a peculiar ring on Yuno's finger, something way beyond your basic bling bling. Before she could investigate further, the situation got even messier. Hiding in the bushes, the female mercenary whispered into her calms that the dragon had been located but was in the company of some rando. Figuring Yuno wasn't worth the trouble, she told him to beat it. But the moment she spoke, Yuno knew her voice sounded way too familiar. Stepping out from the shadows, the mercenary revealed herself, and Yuno's jaw nearly hit the floor. It was Abara, his very own school assistant, now rocking some low-budget Blade cosplay. While Yuno tried to recover from the shock, Abara, equally flustered about being caught playing a secret agent in front of her crush, quickly reassembled her professionalism and ordered Yuno to distance himself from the dragon girl. Stubbornly, Yuno pressed for answers about Abara's involvement and her knowledge of Rin. Abara retorted it was above her pay grade to explain such details to him and insisted he come over to her side at once. However, at that instant, Rin intervened, blocking Yuno's path, and demanded to know why they chatted so casually like she was invisible. But upon taking a closer look, Rin recognized Abara as a vampire fantasy girl, which Abara, unfazed, confirmed she was. Rin, now properly invested in the situation, made it clear that if Abara had come to fight, she at least wanted to know the name of her opponent. Without hesitation, Abara introduced herself, and just like that, the two fantasy girls squared up like it was a Mortal Kombat showdown. Meanwhile, Yuno, still struggling to understand what in the ice sky was going on, tried playing peace ambassador, pleading for some good old-fashioned diplomacy. But Abara wasn't interested and declared it was war. Amid a swirling black ink, Abara transformed into her gothic armament form and then confidently announced herself as the Queen of Death, flaunting her new look as her signature armament element. To keep things fair, Abara told Rin to hurry up and activate her own battle form. But Rin countered that she needed no flashy, stupid makeover to wreck her. Abara called it a major cap, pointing out that Rin was talking big for someone who couldn't even activate her armor. Thanks to the inhibitors suppressing her abilities after her death sentence, Rin was basically fighting at 10% power. Still, Abara, being generous, offered Rin a last chance to surrender and be a good little dragon girl. But Rin scoffed that Abara must be delusional and vowed to tame her sharp tongue. Infuriated, Abara threatened she'd long waited to break a dragon's wings, and that day seemed perfect for it. Pointing at Abara's face, Rin swore that the only thing breaking would be Abara's canopy nose and promised to flatten it more than a fast food billboard. Enraged beyond measure by the roasting, Abara vowed to bury Rin 6 feet under. Without a second of hesitation, Abara transformed her dark ink into a giant axe-like weapon, shocking Yuno to the bones. Abara wasted no time lunging at the Dragon Princess, swinging her weapon like a seasoned assassin, but Rin just stepped to the side. Abara made it clear she was trying to play nice since her mission was to capture Rin alive. But, of course, if Rin wanted to act up, things could go from a 0 to 100 real quick. With that, Abara moved for a second attack, this time clearly with the intention of closing the distance so she could land a decisive strike. Rin, on the other hand, couldn't help but admire how effortlessly Abara was shifting her weapon's shape. Abara, eager to show off, pointed out that her weapon couldn't only change shape and then asked Rin to watch her next move. Before Rin could react, Abara's weapon morphed into thousands of razor-sharp daggers, raining down on her, piercing every bit of her dragon body. Rin scrambled to use her dragon wings as a shield, but that was exactly the opening Abara was waiting for. The second Rin exposed her back, Abara slashed her without hesitation. Watching both girls throw hands like it was a scene from Attack on Titan left Yuno absolutely speechless. He couldn't believe that his overly clingy assistant was actually this bloodthirsty battle maniac in front of him. Meanwhile, after that slash on the back, Rin was in terrible shape as she struggled even to keep her feet on the ground. With her opponent almost done for, Abara moved in for the final blow, ready to finish what she started. But just as she swung her axe, Yuno intercepted the attack and got stabbed in the process. While bleeding from the hand, Yuno ordered Abara to stand down as her senpai and mentioned that as her junior, he would not stand and watch her take someone's life. Before Abara could respond, Rin suddenly scooped Yuno up like a Disney princess and took off into the sky freaking out. Yuno tried pleading with Rin to chill a little, promising that everything would be sorted out once they talk like normal people. But Rin yelled at him to shut his filthy mouth. Watching her crush get carried away like a bride by the same dragon girl she was trying to capture had Abara feeling some type of way. Angry and desperate, she summoned an entire cavalry of bloodthirsty creatures to hunt them down. But despite her efforts, they slipped away. Frustrated beyond belief, Abara found herself wondering why the heck Yuno always insisted on playing Mr. Nice Guy. Meanwhile, Yuno and Rin made it to a cave, where Yuno was busy groaning in pain and decorating the floor with his blood. Annoyed, concerned, and still a little high on battle adrenaline, Rin demanded to know why Yuno had sacrificed himself to save her while yelling that he shouldn't have since she was already condemned to die. In response, Yuno remarked that he chose to save her because, of course, he is a nice guy. Shocked, Rin retorted that she had never expected such a reply, to which Yuno sheepishly smiled and said a lot of people had always complained about him being a nice guy. Rin sighed and pointed out that since Yuno was no longer just a random dude dragged into the fight, but was now fully involved, she would need his help. After a brief pause, Yuno agreed to help out any way he could, but as long as it did not involve them clapping Abara. In response, Rin demanded to know if he would not change his mind after hearing what she was about to ask, to which Yuno nodded firmly that he wouldn't. That said, Rin locked eyes with Yuno and then dropped the bomb, asking Yuno to marry her. Meanwhile, Abara, gripped by anxiety, bolted into the night like a caffeinated cheetah in search of Rin and Yuno, hoping they might not have gone far due to Rin's injuries and that her knights might have tracked Rin down. Yet, upon reaching a clearing, Abara froze in disbelief at the sight of scattered knight helmets, a clear indication that her knights had been decimated. As Abara stood there, mouth agape, wondering how an injured Rin had smoked her army of dead, that's when she saw her. Rin, standing tall, looking fresher than a makeup commercial model with not even a single scratch on her. Abara was in utter shock, wondering how Rin's injuries had healed so quickly. That's when it hit her, and she immediately thought of Yuno's ring. But then, before all these happened, let's rewind back to the cave where Rin had proposed marriage to Yuno. Instantly, Yuno assumed by marriage, Rin must be talking about eating him for nutrition, and then immediately begged not to be turned into dragon chow. At that moment, however, the ring on Yuno's finger started to shine brightly, piquing his curiosity about why it glowed. Rin explained that the ring was a link, and as the bearer of the ring, Yuno was a linker. Then, Rin went down on one knee and solemnly declared that though this contract would be a difficult one, but in exchange, she pledged to protect Yuno with her entire being. With that, Yuno consented, and amidst a radiant light, they exchanged vows. The moment their vows were exchanged, another ring magically materialized on Rin's finger, and she was dramatically restored as the planet's apex predator. Fast forwarding to the present, now clad in full dragon armament, Rin threatened to show Abara the power of the soul-linking technique. Swiftly, Abara hurled sharp daggers at Rin, but with one powerful, swift hand movement, Rin deflected them all. Then, moving faster than Abara's brain could process, Rin closed the gap and swung her weapon with enough force to destroy even Captain America's shield. Abara, acting on pure instinct, blocked with her shield, only for it to be sliced in half like expired cheese. Rin urged Abara to surrender, confidently assuring her that it would only be by a miracle that Abara would be able to defeat her in the overpowered state that she was in. That, of course, made the stubborn goat infuriated as she entered her own Super Saiyan moment, summoning a horde of undead knights bigger and badder than the disposable minions Rin had wiped out earlier. Boldly, Abara assured Rin that these warriors wouldn't fall so easily and then commanded them to charge. Smirking, Rin commended Abara's tenacity before casting Fafnir, a spell that unleashed a blinding light, vaporizing Abara's entire army in the blink of an eye and leaving Yuno dumbfounded. Standing amid the wreckage, Abara, barely holding herself together, declared that she'd never surrender. Approaching her, Rin realized that Abara was as annoying as a mosquito, which meant she would keep pursuing her as long as she lived, and decided it was best to end her. Just as Rin moved to act on that threat, Yuno shouted for her to stop, stepped between them, and reminded her that he agreed to help, not to become an accessory to murder. Yuno even went as far as to say that if Rin laid another finger on Abara, he'd switch sides. Abara, on the verge of collapsing, somehow summoned enough strength to call Yuno a certified idiot before dramatically passing out in his arms. Suddenly, helicopter spotlights bathed them in light, and a guy dressed like the SWAT team ordered Yuno and the girls to raise their hands and kneel. Surprisingly, at that moment, two figures descended from the chopper. One was Ranko, the student council president, and the other, a random dude. Approaching a bewildered Yuno, Ranko flashed an odd object in his face, inducing drowsiness and causing Yuno to pass out. Days later, Yuno woke up strapped down like a psych ward patient, blinking up at a strange ceiling and wondering if he'd finally lost his sanity. As he jolted upright, he spotted the random dude from before on a phone call. The dude, noticing Yuno was awake, politely introduced himself as Sarashina, a research physician at the facility. Sensing Yuno's confused expression, Sarashina immediately tendered an apology, attributing the restraints to standard protocol and promising to release him once the checkup was complete. Curiously, Yuno demanded to know his whereabouts, and before Sarashina could answer, Ranko popped out from God knows where offering to explain. Taking that as his cue to exit, Sarashina dipped, leaving Yuno in Ranko's capable hands. Disoriented, Yuno asked Ranko if all that had happened had been a dream, to which Ranko reassured him they were real. Sadly, Ranko informed Yuno that his former world had vanished, meaning he could never reclaim his old life. Rising from the bed, Ranko invited Yuno to tour the facility with her. As they wandered through, Ranko explained that the research center studied fantasy factors and the fantasy girls who bore them. Intrigued, Yuno inquired about these fantasy girls, prompting Ranko to cite Rin and Abara as prime examples. Elaborating, Ranko described fantasy factors as traits of extinct mythical creatures now harbored by fantasy girls. When Yuno asked the obvious question, why men couldn't possess these factors, Ranko clarified that men were biologically incapable of hosting fantasy factors. Furthermore, Ranko noted that such traits could develop naturally or be forcibly acquired. To illustrate, Ranko revealed that these girls weren't born as fantasy girls but became them. Additionally, Ranko listed the 7 known fantasy factors on Earth: unicorn, amorphous, dragon, phoenix, vampire, werewolf, and succubus. However, she cautioned that the phoenix factor hadn't surfaced in years. Pressing further, Yuno demanded to know if Ranko had known Abara had been a fantasy girl all along, and she confirmed she had. Expanding on this, Ranko disclosed that Abara was not only a vampire fantasy girl, but Abara was also part of a shady organization called the Order, a faction that was apparently at war with the Institute. The tour took a sharp nosedive when they reached a room where Rin was strapped down like a lab rat about to get dissected. Ranko then informed Yuno that Rin was scheduled for execution. When Yuno asked why, Ranko explained that every fantasy girl eventually goes full psycho thanks to an inner devil that grows stronger as their factor grows, much like a soul-consuming cancer. Moreover, Ranko warned that once this devil matured, it seized the mind, sparking a rampage. Ranko broke down the process into 3 horrifying stages. First, they start losing control over their abilities. Second, their personality gets hijacked by the devil inside. And third, they become living nukes. And since Rin was a dragon, that meant she'd turn into a walking atomic bomb. Regrettably, Ranko added that no cure existed, and execution by guillotine was the only solution at the final stage. In addition, Ranko noted that when a fantasy girl died, her factor would move on to another host, therefore birthing another. Ranko clarified that Rin's execution was averted thanks to Yuno's ring called the Link, which, per ancient stories, suppressed a fantasy girl's devil and prevented them from going berserk. The one who carried the link was called the Linker, and they possessed the ability to create a bond with the fantasy girl through a soul wedding contract. Explaining further, Ranko revealed that this bond transferred some of the fantasy girl's traits to the Linker, like Yuno's healed injuries from Rin's dragon factor. Bowing gratefully, Ranko thanked Yuno for saving Rin and the world. However, she warned that his existence now endangered the world. Ranko stressed that while Rin's rampage was contained, Yuno's death would unleash it anew. Ranko sternly warned Yuno that his life was no longer solely his and vowed that the Institute would protect him. But then, Ranko revealed they were exploring a man-made link and would need Yuno's aid to liberate fantasy girls from their curses. Hesitantly, Yuno agreed to help, and Ranko expressed her gratitude. Suddenly, however, Yuno blacked out. When he woke up, he was somehow back in his apartment. Confused, he assumed the whole nightmare had been a fever dream and decided to get ready for school like a responsible guy. That illusion shattered the moment he stepped into his bathroom, only to find Rin, completely unclad, casually showering like she owned the place. Irritated, Rin called him an idiot and told him that just because they were married didn't mean he got the privilege to binge her plots in 4K. Just then, Renko strolled in, dressed like a mad scientist, and informed Yuno that their cohabitation as a couple was the experiment's first step. From that moment, Yuno and Rin started their new life as a couple, though Yuno felt like a contestant on a reality show he never signed up for. As if the situation wasn't already awkward enough, Renko announced that she'd also be moving in to monitor the experiment's progress. But Yuno objected to the girls staying in his crib, citing that his apartment was too small and cramped up to accommodate 3 persons comfortably. Hesitantly, Yuno asked Rin how she felt living with a near stranger and assured her he'd discuss canceling the arrangement with Renko if she was not cool with it. To his surprise, Rin had 0 complaints. In fact, Rin openly admitted that even though Yuno's apartment was basically a shoebox with plumbing, she was staying put. What she didn't say out loud was that living with Yuno secured her freedom, while leaving meant confinement in the facility. That, and the fact that she actually liked Yuno. Rin confessed that after he nearly died saving her, her heart had been doing backflips, and since she wasn't exactly well versed in emotions, thanks to growing up as a demonic princess, she figured she might as well entrust herself to him. Right then, Yuno noticed Rin's horns peeking out and asked why she suddenly looked like Hellboy. Rin, flustered, explained that they popped out whenever she got excited. She then assumed Yuno must find them cringe, but Yuno casually told her they looked cool and that he'd love to examine them up close next time. In response, Rin began stripping while Yuno, on the verge of a heart attack, screamed for her to stop, demanding to know what in the actual OnlyFans she was doing. Rin, completely unfazed, explained she was just helping him get a better look before spreading her dragon wings and flicking her tail like she was about to flex on social media. Completely mesmerized, Yuno grabbed her tail, fascinated by its smooth, snake-like texture. Curiosity got the best of him, and he muttered something about dragons having sensitive spots. Naturally, his next brilliant idea was to poke around Rin's neck. However, before his hand could make contact, Rin's fist introduced itself to his jaw in a violent uppercut that could have sent him to the Shadow Realm. Glaring at him, Rin coldly warned him never to touch her weak spots unless he wanted to experience a sudden and painful death. Playfully, when Rin noted that since Yuno had touched her soft features, it was her turn to touch him, Yuno froze in shock and yelled for Renko. Instantly, Renko burst in without no plot armor, asking what was happening. But the useless virgin fainted on the spot on seeing her flat, shapeless body. Meanwhile, Aya, outside Yuno's apartment, used a spare key to enter and froze in disbelief upon seeing Yuno with the girls in an incredibly sus position. Quickly, Yuno fabricated a lie, claiming Rin and Renko were his long-lost overseas relatives. Aya, proving once again that common sense wasn't really common, bought the ridiculous excuse and simply reminded Yuno to get ready for school. Before departing, however, Renko encouraged Rin to enjoy herself, and as they walked to school, Yuno was amazed to see Rin for the first time, smiling like she just won the lottery. Due to the fantasy factor forced into her, Rin had lost her memories, had her future stolen, and nearly faced execution for a near rampage. Consequently, she'd never experienced student life, but Yuno figured she deserved to enjoy every bit of student life she could to the fullest. Suddenly, as Rin skipped joyfully toward school, a truck con nearly flattened her. In a stunning twist, while Yuno and Aya screamed in terror for her to beware, Rin halted the speeding vehicle with one hand like a low-budget Wonder Woman, shattering it and leaving onlookers agape. Passers-by gathered, drawn to the Hollywood blockbuster, but to avoid going viral for all the wrong reasons, Yuno did the only reasonable thing. He apologized to the traumatized crowd, scooped Rin up like a kidnapped princess, and sprinted to school before anyone could start asking questions. That day at school, the classroom buzzed with excitement over a new transfer student from abroad who'd recently enrolled. Shortly thereafter, the teacher entered and introduced Rin to the class. As Rin strode in with regal poise, the students, including Yuno, couldn't peel their eyes off her. Consequently, after class, classmates swarmed Rin with silly questions, visibly rattling her nerves. While Yuno observed, thinking Rin was actually blending in, Abara approached him, confessed she'd missed him, and grabbed his junk, freaking Yuno out. Abara cautioned him against shouting or tattling, then revealed she and Renko had signed an agreement not to interfere with each other at school. Yuno, in shock, replied, saying he understood, but just then, Rin, with a glare screaming, "Hands off my man," thought, interrupted, sparking a verbal clash between the girls. To claim victory, Rin boldly proclaimed she and Yuno were married, silencing the class momentarily before whispers erupted while Yuno scrambled to clarify it wasn't the marriage they imagined. Even so, the girls persisted with insults, even proposing a milk bag challenge to compare fullness and bounds. Realizing neither had the edge in cup size, they abandoned the contest. Desperately, Rin shouted that her bond with Yuno involved nighttime private touching, stunning the class into silence again as whispers reignited. Unyielding, Abara unleashed a barrage of insults until the teacher stormed in, grumbled about the noise, and told everyone to get lost. During PE class, Abara and Rin's feud raged on until the teacher summoned Rin to throw a discus ball. Confidently, Rin took the ball struck an Olympic discus pose, but slipped mid-throw, denting the iron ball with her hand. Abara wasted no time mocking Rin, and when the teacher called for her turn, she tossed the ball cleanly, earning a 3.2-meter record. After PE, the students headed to the cafeteria for lunch. There, as the girls were about to resume the usual argument and insults, Yuno pleaded with them, for the love of all that is good, to stop, saying that they were drawing too much attention. Reluctantly, they complied, ceased bickering, and began eating. But then as they chewed on, Yuno noticed their shared love for the food sparked a bond over its tastiness. Just then, Abara's phone buzzed with a message, prompting her to excuse herself for a bathroom break and step outside. Once out of school, Abara dialed the dude named Loki. On the call, Loki asked if the dragon princess truly attended her school, and Abara confirmed it. Apologetically, Loki expressed regret for disrupting her work, but questioned if she was hiding anything from him. Defensively, Abara asked if her report had flaws, to which Loki replied it was flawless. Abara stressed she was occupied monitoring the dragon princess and preferred no interference. So, Loki abruptly ended the call and, in a fury, crushed his phone. Suspiciously, he sensed something amiss with Abara's overly perfect report, hinting she was trying to cover something like the appearance of the link. The next day at school, Ranko casually declared that Rin was joining the council. That bombshell triggered an instant uproar, with Abara and Aya leading the resistance. They accused Ranko of treating her presidential authority like a dictatorship, but Ranko couldn't care less. When Rin, completely unbothered by the chaos, asked what her role was, Ranko dropped another nuke, revealing that she would be the vice president's assistant, instantly sending Abara into a frenzy. Observing the girls squabble, Yuno attempted to explain that he didn't need an assistant, but Aya hushed him, insisting his workload demanded an assistant. Later that day, after wrapping up his vice presidential tasks, Yuno and Rin headed home. However, Yuno felt oddly drained, like someone had swapped his energy with that of a koala. Then, out of nowhere, his phone buzzed with a message from Abara confirming that the council funds had been transferred to his account. So he decided to withdraw some cash and asked Rin to wait. But as he made his way there, he started hallucinating, mistaking random pedestrians for mohawked thugs from the Phantom Zone. Luckily, Ranko appeared and assured him they were just regular people, not interdimensional gangsters. Shortly after, Sarashina pulled up in a car to pick them up. On the way, he reminded Yuno about his routine checkup at the institute. Curious, Yuno asked if the checkup had anything to do with examining the link. But before he could get an answer, Ranko shut his loud mouth immediately and feigned ignorance like she had no idea what the link was, making Yuno suspicious. Yuno figured if Ranko was acting this shady, the link must be a top secret because it was complicated and it concerned the fate of the entire world. The fewer who knew, the better. At the institute, Ranko confirmed Yuno's vitals were fine, but then reminded him to keep his big mouth shut about the link unless he wanted to see what a horror movie looked like. Ranko also casually mentioned that thanks to her, Yuno wasn't locked up like a lab rat. Ranko further revealed that the institute had originally planned to treat him like a science experiment, but she worked some magic behind the scenes to give him basic human rights. Speaking of secrets, Ranko pointed out that Abara must have kept quiet about Yuno being the linker. Otherwise, the Order would have already sent an assassin to end their lives. With business at the institute wrapped up, they headed home, where Yuno promised to cook as a peace offering. After dinner, Ranko suddenly stood up and announced she was leaving to buy new plates, conveniently right after Yuno broke some while cooking. Yuno, still not catching on, asked why she had to go alone. Ranko called him a dense virgin and told him to start using his eyes. As Ranko insisted on leaving, Yuno offered her a spare key, but she spilled a whole bag of them like a professional stalker and assured him she had more than enough. As Ranko stepped out, Rin rushed to the door and asked her to stay safe, to which Ranko turned back, smiled, and then thanked her for being considerate. With Ranko gone, Yuno commented on how much Rin seemed to like Ranko. Rin admitted that Ranko had been the only person who treated her with kindness back at the institute. Despite all the warnings, Ranko had approached her first, offered friendship, and basically saved her from living in total isolation. On a lighter note, Rin suggested they Netflix and chill, plus wash each other's bodies, since Ranko was out. However, before she could finish the statement, Yuno vanished faster than my dad and chose to remain a protagonist. Left alone, Rin turned on the TV and stumbled upon an interview with a mustached man ranting about how every thug disturbing the peace deserved the death penalty, piquing her curiosity. Meanwhile, across town, Ranko walked into a cafe, where a very pissed-off Abara was waiting. Abara, never one to hide her feelings, immediately demanded to know why Ranko had the audacity to drag a sweet girl like her out so late. Ranko apologized for the delay, and then flexed her Elon Musk net worth by signaling the waiters to bring the best meal on the menu. Getting serious, Ranko revealed that as members of both the Institute and the Order, and with everything going on, they needed to discuss the worst-case scenario. Back at Yuno's place, Rin, now completely restless, couldn't shake off what she heard on TV. Something about that execution speech got under her skin. Unable to hold back, she woke Yuno from his deep slumber and asked, point blank, if he believed that some people truly deserved to die. The narration shifted to a brief history of Abara, whose personal records had been carefully fabricated. According to her official records, she was the love child of a Romanian father and a Japanese mother, with a conveniently placed little sister. They were allegedly raised in Bucharest until her parents tragically whisked the sister away on a business trip, leaving Abara to relocate to Japan. Publicly, this was the accepted backstory. In truth, however, Abara was an orphan, clueless about her real parents, making her vulnerable prey for the Institute when the fantasy factor emerged. Flashback to her first day meeting Yuno, Abara strolled into class only to discover her bag missing, while some nosy girls mocked her mercilessly. Enraged, Abara nearly strangled one of the girls resembling Lizzo when she wasn't too legit but decided instead to ditch them and hunt for her bag. While scouring for it, Abara struggled to steady herself. Her vampire factor had flared, and she desperately craved blood, yet her blood pouch remained in the lost bag. With no other option and almost on the verge of death, Abara resolved to feed on a stranger. Just then, Yuno bumped into her in the hallway, and noticing Abara looked paler than an albino with a vitamin D deficiency, Yuno offered to walk her to the infirmary. Before she could sink her teeth into his neck, Abara realized Yuno was drenched, and shockingly, he was holding her bag. Hastily, Abara snatched the bag from him, frantically searching for the blood pouch, only to find it missing. Kindly, Yuno offered to assist her search, but Abara brushed him off and started to walk away. Unexpectedly, Yuno hoisted her onto his back, startling her. Initially, Abara squirmed to break free, but soon relaxed and started to enjoy being carried. Curiously, Abara asked why Yuno was soaked, and Yuno calmly explained he'd caught a punk tossing a student's bag into a lake, so as vice president, he had beat the life out of the delinquent and dived into the lake to retrieve the bag. Intrigued, Abara asked why he'd bothered, to which Yuno replied that, as VP, it was his duty. Yuno also added that despite how anyone might feel about it, but if he felt like helping, he would without waiting for anyone's approval. Moved by his words, Abara teared up unknowingly and requested Yuno's help. Before Yuno could clarify what she needed, Abara bared her vampire fangs and nipped his neck. Thankfully, her bite came with a built-in anesthetic, so Yuno barely noticed as Abara drained his blood like a premium juice box. Once satisfied, Abara playfully demanded Yuno carry her all the time, officially making him her personal Uber. Fast-forwarding to the present, Abara, in her room, heard a knock and, upon entering the living room, found Loki lounging on her sofa like he paid rent. Infuriated by his smug face, she demanded to know what he wanted in her space. Calmly, Loki stated he bore a message from the New Order. Loki relayed that the New Order commanded her to abort her current mission and return to headquarters immediately. Stunned, Abara asked why, and Loki shrugged, claiming he was just the messenger. Pressing further, Abara inquired who issued the order, to which Loki replied it came from the higher-ups. Growing impatient with all the interrogations, Loki snapped, called Abara a brat, and reminded her that the command was not a suggestion but an order. Loki reminded Abara that she was wearing a choker, which alone gave her no right whatsoever to refuse any order. Smirking defiantly, Abara asked if Loki truly intended to activate the choker with mere words, warning that doing so would force the order to hunt for another vampire factor. before she could finish. However, Abara crumpled to the floor, gasping for breath, paralyzed. Desperately glancing at Loki, Abara spotted a glowing ring on his finger, the link ring. Just then, Loki revealed that he had always known Abara was covering for the brat with the link instead of reporting about the link, a betrayal warranting punishment. Approaching, Loki grabbed Abara by the hair, threatened her life was his to take, and reminded her of the collar's power. Walking to the door, Loki smugly announced they had 24 hours before the plan launched, with function testing already complete. Half turning towards Abara, Loki added that her mission would commence soon, and the savior of the world had finally arrived. Meanwhile, the next day after school, Yuno and Rin strolled home after a long day of learning. Yet, just as they reached the school gate, two ugly dudes, Kuroi and Yanagida, intercepted them, announcing they'd come for the routine checkup pickup. This time, however, they clarified that the checkup focused solely on Rin, and Yuno would head home. Feeling quite suspicious, Rin noted Ranko hadn't mentioned any sudden changes, prompting Yanagida to explain that it must have been some form of miscommunication, and then revealed that the order truly came from the acting chief. Unconvinced, Rin demanded to speak to the acting chief, but Kuroi interjected, acknowledging her suspicion and reassuring her all was well. Reluctantly, Rin consented, expressed understanding, and offered her cooperation. Shortly thereafter, while lingering at the door, Yanagida and Kuroi yapped about how Yuno's presence seemed to be magically keeping the fantasy factors in check. Yanagida then brought up the issue of Yuno and Rin living together and how weird it was for the acting chief to suddenly separate them for that day's checkup. But at that moment, in a shocking twist, Kuroi pulled a gun on Yanagida. Meanwhile, Yuno, inside, jolted at a gunshot and raced outside to see what the heck was going on. Upon arriving, he discovered Kuroi aiming a gun at Yanagida's lifeless body on the ground. Simultaneously, in the lab room, Sarashina concluded Rin's checkup after injecting her with a substance. While reviewing the results of the test he carried out on the screen, Rin called his attention and asked if she could ask him a question. Interpreting Sarashina's silence as consent, Ryan asked why that day's checkup required separating her from Yuno, to which Sarashina replied, still fixated on the screen, that it was the acting chief's order. Intrigued, Rin pressed why Sarashina conducted the checkup instead of Ranko, and Sarashina explained Ranko, the acting chief, was preoccupied that day. Skeptically, Rin asked Sarashina why he had lied. He had no idea about the link and what it even was, and the reply she got was a weird silence from Sarashina. Elaborating, Rin recalled how, half a month ago, Sarashina acted clueless when Yuno accidentally mentioned being the linker during a car ride. Rin mentioned that since then, she had found it weird that a Fantasy Research Girls member had absolutely no knowledge about the link. Now, rising from her chair, Rin declared she burned off his injected drugs and demanded his true motives. Abruptly, Sarashina, realizing his ruse was exposed, donned a gas mask like a villain from Batman, and from nowhere, a poisonous gas flooded the room. Meanwhile, in her office, Ranko was lost in thought about all that had happened since the day Rin was saved from execution till date and felt something just didn't add up. Suddenly, she deduced that apart from the Institute and the Order, there was another mysterious force in play with some hidden agenda. Logically, she figured this group required an inside spy, someone tied to both the Institute's elite and the Order. Initially, her thoughts landed on Sarashina, but she quickly dismissed it, thinking Sarashina was too much of a femboy to be a double agent. Then, she recalled spotting Sarashina sneaking into the lab with Rin earlier, like horny teens desperate for some clapping action. Knowing dang well there was no checkup that day, Ranko made her way to the lab at lightning speed. Upon entering, her eyes widened at Rin sprawled on the floor. Instinctively, Ranko rushed to save her, but with her last breath, Rin tried warning her to stay back. Before the caution registered, however, gunfire rang out, striking Ranko in the gut. Clutching her stomach in agony, Ranko crumpled to her knees, and in that instant, Sarashina removed his gas mask, unveiling himself as the spy. Just then, Ranko pulled out a blood clutter and a blood replenisher to stop the bleeding, and then demanded to know who truly Sarashina exactly was. Smirking, Sarashina finally revealed himself to be Loki in disguise, the true spy of the Order. Sarashina disclosed that he had a different name for every place he was affiliated with, and he never settled for a fixed name. Curious, Tanko questioned Sarashina or Loki, whatever name makes you sleep well at night, on his grand mission and why he had decided to play such a foolish game. Proudly, Loki extended his hands and declared his aim was simple: world salvation. Seeing how shocked Tanko was at hearing this, Loki elaborated that all he sought was for a dragon factor to go full rampage, cause a major disaster that would wipe out the world, and then bring salvation to the world. Tanko retorted that as his face made no sense, his goal also made no sense. Tanko pointed out that when everyone is trying to save the world, he is seeking the destruction of the world. Defiantly, Loki declared that destruction was the ultimate salvation. Loki went on to explain that he hated narrow-mindedness and those who were not enlightened enough to see the bigger picture. Challenging him, Ranko urged Loki to reveal this bigger picture, and what the Order knew that the Institute didn't. In response, Loki agreed, and then, for starters, he revealed that the link ring on Rin's finger would destroy any moment from then, shocking Ranko. Then, Loki revealed that to achieve his plan, all he needed to do was to end Yuno's life. As a result, the soul wedding would unbound, and the rampage would resume. Feeling relieved, Ranko laughed and mentioned that, sadly, his plan had already crumbled even before it took flight. In response, Loki removed his glove, flaunted his own link ring, stunning Ranko and Rin, and clarified it was a mere imitation of the original. Just then, Loki revealed that, at first, he was kept in the dark about the emergence of the link ring. But fortunately, he learned about it in the car when Yuno's parrot mouth revealed he was the linker. From that day henceforth, he'd spent months amassing intel on the link and linker. Desperately, Ranko lunged for his ring, but Loki sidestepped and commanded it to paralyze her. Instantly, Ranko crumpled, writhing in agony, while Loki smirked, explaining that despite being a replica, his ring could weaken and undo the soul wedding, shocking Ranko and Rin. Moreover, Loki revealed that to unbind the soul of the wedding would require a life sacrifice, and he was very willing to lay down his life for such a noble purpose. Turning to Rin, Loki smugly mocked the likeness she had for Yuno as fake. Loki explained that the affection Rin thought she had for Yuno was merely as a result of the link's influence. Otherwise, it would be almost impossible for a hot dragon chick like her to fall for a useless nobody like Yuno. In response, Rin smiled and said it was quite funny for Loki to describe the love she had for Yuno as being fake. Firmly, Rin mentioned that even though the love she had for Yuno was indeed fake, she couldn't care less. Rin explained that Yuno was a kind-hearted guy who would help everyone and anyone no matter who they were, and that part of him was what she loved the most about him. Placing her hand on her chest, Rin declared that there was no way what she felt for Yuno was fake. Loki branded Rin an idiot for having such a mentality, but Rin retorted, saying she had never expected an ugly loner who no girl loved to understand the matters of the heart. To add salt to injury, Rin asked Loki if the reason he wanted to destroy all of mankind was because no one loved him. At those words, Loki could not contain his anger, so he commanded his ring to unbound the soul wedding, and a massive light engulfed him. Suddenly, he vanished, leaving behind his clothes, and the link ring on Rin's finger immediately broke to pieces, shocking Rin. As a result, Rin immediately transformed into her dragon form, and seeing this, Ranko assured her that she would get Yuno's link ring and get her back to normal. However, Rin simply turned to Ranko and begged her to tell Yuno that she believed in him. And then she fled out of the lab with Ranko trudging just behind her with a bullet wound. Will Yuno be able to form a wedding pact with Rin again and tame her fantasy factor from going on a rampage? Comment Dragon Bride if you're eager to find out in our part 2. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.